The Sonic the Hedgehog series is a mixed bag when it comes to the quality of its writing, especially with its extensive cast of characters. It has thematically rich characters such as Sonic himself, Eggman, or Wade Whipple, but there are also many others who were written with little care given to their characterization. You may have had a few come to your mind just now. Some of you may have thought of a certain group of colorful villains from a certain Wii U title. In this essay, we're going to explore one member of that group in particular, one whom, while his actions may not be excusable, is perhaps a misunderstood soul and has more going on in his psyche than might be obvious at first glance. But why am I making this video? Well, for this year's Game Awards, I had set up expectations for myself that there would be a new mainline 3D Sonic game revealed, as had been done in previous Jeff Keighley shows. I wasn't expecting much, just a short CGI teaser showing Sonic and maybe a title, if we were lucky. So I made a bet that if there was no game revealed, I would write a 3,000 to 4,000 word essay analyzing Zazz from a psychological and narrative perspective. So the Game Awards began. I joined a call of my friends, and we waited, and waited, and waited. And then the event came to a close, and there wasn't so much as a peep from Sonic in regards to new games. There was nothing but an empty hole carved into the collective hearts of the Sonic the Hedgehog fandom. And that is what brings us to where we are now, where we will be diving deep into the mind of the Deadly Six's most bloodthirsty member. To truly understand Zazz, we first need to understand where he comes from. Not much is known about the Lost Hex, only that it's one of the least interesting locations in the Sonic mythos, and it's just another example of Sega desperately trying to appeal to Mario fans because this was a period where they were afraid to let Sonic have its own identity, because instead of realizing that rushed game and story development were the problems behind the early 2000s games, they built it on the expanded cast of interesting characters and exciting creative story. The Lost Hex is a fractured continent that floats above the rest of the world, while not quite outside the atmosphere. There is no defining identity for this lost world, as it is a hodgepodge of biomes with no core beneath its surface. But by the end of this video, hopefully you'll see why I think Zazz is the same way. On the surface, he might seem like a one-dimensional character who simply enjoys violence, defined by one trait. But have you ever come across someone in real life who just seemed shallow? Well, in reality, no matter how shallow someone appears, there is always more going on beneath the surface. In fact, the less apparent depth someone has, the more they are probably hiding beneath. As soon as Zazz is first introduced, he wastes no time in expressing his interest in killing Sonic. When Zavok mentions that Eggman wishes for the Hedgehog's demise, I can actually almost pick up on a sense of reluctance from Zazz at first, despite his eagerness to fight, and I think there is a reason for that. We don't get much interaction between Zazz and Zavok, but I get the feeling that Zavok makes Zazz feel unsafe.
The boss is gonna beat me!
There is one voice line in particular that hints at the possibility that not just Zavok, but the rest of the six verbally abuse Zazz.
Oh, that rotten Sonic! I better take this hedgehog down, or the gang will razz me till I'm blue!
We also see Zazz's fear portrayed in sub-moments from the IDW comics and their rival interactions in Sonic Racing Crossworlds.
Don't think this entitles you to leadership of the Deadly Six. This is merely a race, not a rite of combat.
Well, yeah, sure. Well, unless I win, and then maybe you aren't as scary as I thought. You and me, huh? You know how I am. It's a little fender bender between us, right? Nothing personal.
We are SETI. We do nothing in half measures. Unleash all your come on the track, regardless of your opponent. I demand it.
Assuming the six have grown up with each other, being trained by Master Zik, Zazz has possibly faced a lifetime of scorn and humiliation. We don't know how old the Hex or the Six are, but he has perhaps been subject to abuse for many centuries. Already, I hope you're seeing how a character who has gone through so much must have going on underneath than he lets on. Perhaps one factor behind Zazz's abuse is his body type. Zavik himself must feel superior to Zazz because he has a much more sexually appealing build than the rest of the six. Well, most of them. Zavik might have a history of mocking Zazz for his scrawniness. I can imagine Zavik in his earlier years as being a bully, even to his own team. Even in the present, Zavik treats the rest of the six somewhat poorly, and I do think Zavik sees himself as superior to the others, especially Zazz, because he sends Zazz off to fight Sonic, saying that regardless of the outcome of their battle, all Zavik cares about is learning of Sonic's strengths and weaknesses. Over the years, Zavik might have matured out of being an outright bully, and instead has changed into more of a manipulative, fake friend to the six, with the occasional outburst towards them. But he clearly values loyal soldiers, as seen in the Bad Guys spinoff, but maybe that's all he sees his fellow Zeddy as. Nothing more than means to an end to further his own goals. Another thing Zazz might have been bullied for is his skin color. Zavik is clearly gay as fuck, at least I hope he is. But since he's a bad guy and trained by an old man, he is probably insecure in his homosexuality and tries to deny it by making fun of Zazz for being a gay girly man color and thin like a twink. As a result of Zavik's possible abuse, Zazz might have been conditioned to act superior over those beneath himself. This could be his way of coping with his trauma. I think Zazz just wants to be seen by the world. Notice how he flies around on a giant yellow ball with a big scary face? I mean, nothing screams "give me attention" more than giant yellow balls with big scary faces. After all, yellow is the color that stands out most within nature. Zazz is just looking for validation in the world. He wants to feel like he truly exists. He wants to make his mark, and he is desperate enough to get the attention he wants by any means necessary, even through violence and bloodshed. In a way, he reminds me of Jax from The Amazing Digital Circus, in how they are both aware of their pain, but instead of finding ways to process it in a healthy way or reach out for help from others, their insecurities lead them to cause misery for others because, as subconsciously desperate as they are for connection, they are afraid of kindness, and the only way they know to connect with others is through negativity. Jax is afraid of kindness because he has lost those dear to him before, and he doesn't want to let anyone get that close again because he doesn't want to feel that pain all over again. Zazz is afraid of kindness, perhaps because he has never experienced it. All he knows is violence and misery, to leave his mark on this world by continuing the cycle of hatred he has known his entire life. To Zazz, kindness is a threatening thing because it is a sign of weakness. Perhaps in the past, when Zazz showed such weaknesses to the rest of the six, they only shamed him for it, conditioning him to see kindness as a weakness or even as a threat. From this point, we can only theorize on Zazz's dynamic with the rest of the six, since we have such little material to work with. But let's see what else we can discover about him by studying and theorizing his interactions with the rest. We've already explored his possible history and dynamic with Zavik, and in that section, I mentioned how Master Zik's conservative teachings might have influenced possible insecurities for Zavik's own sexuality. But could Zik have had a similar effect on Zazz? I don't think so. Zazz is very open about how excited he gets in combat, unlike the more reserved Zavik. I think Zik has trained each of the six to use their strongest desires to their advantage in combat. Zazz's lust for battle, Zamam's gluttony, Zavik's pride for himself and his race, Zor's lethargic yet sadistic personality, and Xena's short temper. I recently realized that Zavik's name is probably supposed to be pronounced like Havoc and not like Zavok. So given Zazz's immense hard-on for combat, maybe his name is influenced by the word jizz, because he gets a little wet in his pants when he thinks about beating people up. Raz is also a possibility, but that doesn't fit my bullshit narrative as much. I know there's only 6 of them, but if they were to be compared to the 7 deadly sins from Catholicism, Zazz could easily be lust. And while we're on the topic, Zamam could be gluttony, Xena wrath, Zavik I could see as pride, Zik as greed for taking on 6 students at once due to extreme loneliness, and Zor as sloth because of how burdened he is by the existence of others when they're not in agony. Like I said, everything from this point on will be 100% speculation because we've hardly seen Zazz refer to or interact with the rest of the 6. In regards to him and Zamam, I see them as getting along the best. Zamam can probably tank Zazz's attacks as a sparring partner, or more accurately, like a punching bag. Perhaps Zazz provokes his portly teammate by stealing his food so they engage with each other in real battles. In this regard, I think Zazz enjoys Zamam's company, at least in the context of a fight. Zazz is definitely bored in any other scenario. He's not one to hang out with people. I can also see him possibly antagonizing Xena as well, by messing up her nails or her hair or whatever to get her into a sparring match with him, where neither of them hold back. He probably can't do much to provoke Zor, and thus they probably don't interact very much, and are probably each other's least favorite member of the team. Zor spends much of his time contemplating the tragedy of existence, and getting lost in the strange sense of ecstasy he finds in that feeling. Zazz probably can't even comprehend what's going on in Zor's mind, and is just bored with his presence. Zamam and Xena are more interesting to him, not only because he knows how to push their buttons, but also because they are much easier to understand. Zamam and Xena are perhaps the only people Zazz knows who he feels any sort of connection with, since he can engage in fights with them at any time, and perhaps the 3 of them bond over this. Or at least, I think that's what he subconsciously wants from the experience. Zamam doesn't seem to care about anything except food, so he probably feels nothing towards Zazz. And Xena is perhaps the most hateful member of the 6, so she probably feels nothing for him as well. If that is the case, then even Zazz's only 2 chances at connection do nothing for him. I suppose the only other characters worth considering Zazz's viewpoints on are Sonic and Eggman. Even after his defeat at the hands of Sonic in Lost World, we see in IDW and Crossworlds that he's still itching for a fight against the Hedgehog. From this, we can surmise that Zazz isn't usually one to be intimidated by those who have defeated him, and he's determined to take them down one day, which makes his fear for Zavik all the more impactful and tragic, seeing as he's the only one who Zazz shows any true fear for, and even his supposedly boundless barbaric spirit can be crushed by such a Giga Chad himbo. But since Sonic isn't emotionally abusive like Zavik is, Zazz might actually feel more comfortable fighting him, similar to the theoretical dynamics I mentioned he has with Xena and Zamam. But unlike with those 2, Zazz might one day have the chance to feel a real connection with Sonic, but as long as the rest of the 6, and especially Zavik, are around, he might never get the chance to truly appreciate Sonic as an opponent. Zavik would most certainly discourage forming any sort of connection with the enemy. After all, Zavik is only interested in seeing his foes crushed, so keeping someone like Sonic around to engage in battle with would be out of the question. Zazz might be the Zeddy who is the most capable of doing good. Hear me out. He has enough intelligence, or maybe more accurately, instinct, to gauge who strong opponents are, and thus might have enough respect for Zamam and Xena to want to protect them if their lives were ever in danger, because he'd realize what he'd be losing out on if they ever died. I also imagined a situation where maybe he doesn't realize what he has with the 6 until it's gone. A situation where the others are dead and he is the last one alive. He might even miss Zavik as much as he fears him, because Zavik's leadership gives him purpose. It gives him reasons to do what he loves doing. But if Zazz doesn't have them anymore, perhaps that would put him in a situation of turning good, or at least losing his desire to harm others, because he no longer has anyone to share that passion with. On the flip side, what if Zazz lost them, but instead of someone like Sonic helping him change his ways, Eggman takes in Zazz as a new henchman, essentially replacing Zavok in his life? I can see the latter being more likely. After all, Eggman has a history of manipulating lost individuals to enact his own plots, and he could certainly get a lot of mileage out of Zazz. But maybe Zazz would eventually realize that working for Eggman isn't the same thing as being with the Zeddy, and he would lash out at Eggman with all of the unprocessed feelings of losing his old teammates. Then he would find himself alone in this world, endlessly searching for purpose through random acts of violence until someone finally defeats him for the last time. Maybe, in the end, the true lost hex was Zazz all along.